Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of the Prajna Gender Talks, which for 10 years before that were the Women's History Roundtable series. We are delighted to have many of you here for the first time today, and I hope you will continue to be a part of this series in months to come. We usually convene on the second Saturday of every month from 10:30 to noon, and we like to say we start on time and finish on time every time. Uh, going digital in the last 2 months has allowed us to invite friends from all over the country. Uh, Earlier, we would just look for people who could commute by auto or car to our office, and that would be that. It's been a great, we feel empowered to be able to include friends like Radhika last month and Christina this month, and the people we've lined up for the next few months as well. And I'm delighted to introduce to you Christina Furtado, whom I have now known since, I don't know, 17 years. Christina? Christina has sent me a typically self-effacing bio. So I will first read out the one she's officially sent, and then I will scandalize her by adding some other details. Equal Community Foundation, and Christina is the executive director of the foundation, was established by Wilmuir and Rujuta Teredesai in 2009 with a mission to raise every boy in India to be gender equitable. ECF has been implementing its flagship gender transformative program for boys, Action for Equality, in Pune, Maharashtra for the last 10 years. ECF has also built the capacity of over 50 organizations around India to implement similar programs for boys. Currently, ECF is the technical capacity building partner for ICRW on their Gender Equality Movement in Schools program in Rajasthan, and UNESCO India on their Transforming Mentalities program for CBSE networks in India. Christina has been leading operations at ECF since 2015. Christina has a PhD in political science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and that is how I know her. We're alumni of the same program. And she has an MA in political science from the University of Mumbai and a BA in economics from St. Xavier's College. She has worked as coordinator Global Studies Initiative at UIUC, assistant dean at Brown University, and dean at Flame University in Pune before joining ECF, where she volunteered for some years before she joined officially. I think any organization would be lucky to have somebody like Christina work with them, because she is so focused and she brings so much passion and sincerity and meticulous attention to everything that she does. I'm so delighted that we get to learn from her about this very cliched, what has become cliched because it's become a hashtag for so many people, including men and boys. And I'm putting quotes around it deliberately because I know Christina will take them off. How do you actually do it when you set out to look for how-tos and program ideas and activity ideas? There's very little out there. And so, Christina, we're looking forward to hearing from you today. Christina has a technical issue and cannot use her video, but we will use her PPT as her primary screen through this presentation. Welcome, Christina. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Swarna, for the kind introduction as well as this opportunity to talk about our work. I can assure you I am sitting in my office with my mask on. I'm not sitting at home with my pajamas, but I have not been able to get my camera to cooperate. Anyway, I think the PPT will have to serve as a stand-in for now. Great. So before I start, I just want to share that I have Yogesh, who's also on the call with us. Yogesh is one of my colleagues who's been with ECF for a lot longer than I have. And at some point in the presentation or later during the question and answers, I'll probably have him share some of his insights as well. So hi, Yogesh. And yeah, we'll just get started. So like Swarna said, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the why today, because I think over the last few years, people have come to understand why it is important to include men and boys in this conversation. It was not the case about 10 years ago when ECF began, because we spent a lot of time trying to convince not just funders, but people within the civil society space about the need to engage men and boys. But we're glad and grateful to know that today that has changed considerably. So for today's talk, I think I will focus on what we do and how we do it, in the hopes that maybe if any of you want to start programs, then you'll have some ideas of where you can start, right? So to begin with, I'd like to tell you about Vikas. Vikas is a 14-year-old boy who lives in a low-income community in Pune. And these low-income communities are typically spaces that are rife with violence and crime. There's a lot of drugs, alcohol, and sexual violence. All these things are commonplace. And of course, Bollywood's version of toxic masculinity is the gold standard for what it means to be a man. Vikas has grown up witnessing street sexual harassment, and he understands that it's the norm to tease girls. If they are out and about, then they're fair game, right? But yet Vikas is a boy who leads rallies against street sexual harassment in his community. He does this because he understands that attraction is natural, but how you express that attraction makes all the difference between harassment and being respectful. He also understands that when he teases girls, they are pulled out of school and they are made to sit at home. And more importantly, they lose their right to education. And he understands that this in itself also constitutes violence. So he now understands that something that he has been taken for granted and as common practice for a long time is actually something that has serious consequences for girls around him. And he recognizes that this is something that he can control and he can change about his behavior. And most importantly, he understands that by changing his behavior, he can ensure that he will not be infringing on someone else's human rights. So this is an outcome that we call gender equitable boys. Again, we are Equal Community Foundation, and ECF was set up by Will and Rujuta in 2009. Our mission is to raise every boy in India to be gender equitable, and we work towards this mission by building innovative programs, by building tools to measure the impact and to demonstrate the impact of these programs. And we disseminate all our resources and tools to other organizations in the sector with the aim of building the capacity of the sector to implement similar programs more widely. So our flagship program is called Action for Equality. We have been implementing Action for Equality in Pune for the last 10 years in 20 low-income communities. This is a program that is targeted towards 13 to 17-year-old boys, and we engage these boys over a period of 30 to 40 weeks over a year. and we take them through a structured process. Now, we've developed this curriculum over the years, but we haven't developed it from scratch. We've also stood on the shoulders of giants and pioneers who've come before us. So we've drawn very heavily on the work of organizations like ICRW, like Promundo, like Coro, MAVA, Masoom, Samyak, and CHSJ. And over the years, we've contextualized all these materials to suit our context here in Pune. And we've also been able to develop monitoring and evaluation tools to actually capture the impact of this program. So to talk a little bit about what we do, I'll just go over some of the lessons that we've learned. And these lessons have actually come to constitute cornerstones or principles that underpin all the work that we do. I'll just walk you through a couple of these principles. So first and foremost, we believe that men and boys are not born violent and discriminatory. We believe that it is the socialization in a patriarchal system that makes them inclined towards violent and discriminatory behaviors. At the same time, we believe that not all men are a part of the problem, but all men can be a part of the solution. We believe that men are capable of change, that they want to change, and they want to be a part of the solution. We also ensure that all our messaging is focused on
Christina,
making...
Your
Yes?
sound is very scratchy.
Oh,
Can you adjust your position vis-a-vis the mic?
Is this better?
A little. I'll just send you a note on chat if it's crackly.
Yes, please. Yes, please. So we focus all our messaging around men being allies and not champions or heroes. So any steps that they take towards gender equality are not glorified. They are treated as part of what we all should do because we are human beings and because we are people. Our work is also deeply rooted in the human rights approach and the participatory approach. So we believe that the work that we do with men and boys to alleviate violence and discrimination against women and girls is mainly to ensure that all of us can work together to uphold each other's human rights. And our boys are not granting anyone any rights or are not doing anyone any favors. We're doing what we need to do as people, and we're upholding each other's human rights. We also believe that our participants bring their own sets of opinions, beliefs, and experiences to the table. And it is our job to ensure that we take those into account and we work with them to create an opportunity for reflection. So we do two things. We try to make sure that we keep their needs in mind as well. So it's not about ECF telling them what they should think and what they should do, because it's ECF's agenda to promote gender equality. But we also take into account their needs around how they want to be better people and how can we frame what we are doing in that context. We also work hard to create a safe space for reflection. So that our participants are free to express their opinions. They don't have to worry about getting pulled up for what they've said. They are able to unpack all their thoughts and their experiences without being worried or without being afraid of being singled out. We also focus on ensuring that our materials are geared towards gender transformation so that our participants can identify, challenge, and change gender norms, so that they can recognize what the norm is, they can think about whether it's appropriate, whether it's violent and discriminatory, whether it should be changed, and then work towards changing this norm. And finally, we emphasize the fact that these programs with men and boys are meant to complement the work that is being done with women and girls. At no point do we believe that we have to stop working with women and girls now and we only have to work with men and boys. No. We believe that by working with men and boys and including them and making them a part of this conversation, we can improve the outcomes that we have in programs that are focused on women and girls. So our theory of change essentially is that if boys are equipped with knowledge on human rights and gender, and if they are equipped with skills around critical thinking, assertive communication, and problem solving, they will be able to reflect on their own attitudes and behaviors, and they will be able to change their own attitudes and behaviors. And eventually, they will be able to influence change within their families, their peer groups, and their communities. So what does all of this look like in reality? In Pune, what we do is we bring groups of 15 to 20 adolescent boys together for a weekly 2-hour session. The session is facilitated by a male mentor, and the mentor will typically facilitate activities and games on a range of topics such as human rights, gender, adolescent changes, types of violence, sexuality, masculinity, etc. And this is the question that we are asked most often, which is how do you talk to boys about gender? How do you talk to boys about a topic that is as vast as human rights, or masculinity, or power, or patriarchy? And I think here the answer is fairly simple. Our focus is always on taking these concepts and making them or simplifying them to a point where boys can relate to them. So I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the topics that we cover and some of the activities that we use. Fundamentally, once we've identified the topic and we're figuring out the activity, there's two things that we keep in mind. One is the content, the concepts that we want to communicate, and the other piece is the methodology. So the what and the how. And in designing the how, one of our favorite techniques is what we call, or what is known as the known to unknown principle, right? This is used in facilitation quite a bit. And the idea is to take what the participants know and understand, to get them to reflect on that, and then to guide them through a reflective exercise and discussion to what they don't know, or rather what you want them to understand. So, for example, if we take human rights as a topic, what we will do is we will set up an activity for participants. We will tell them that, you know, they've been out at sea for a while, they've had to, or they've experienced a massive storm, and now they're shipwrecked on an island, and they've got to build their lives from scratch. They can set up their own country, and they've got to tell us what they're going to have in this country, right? So you've got to build your own country from scratch. So what they'll do is they'll draw their little island, they'll draw their boundaries, there'll be rivers. That little blue ribbon is actually a river. They'll draw rivers, they'll draw fields, they'll draw mountains, they'll draw sunshine. And then we'll start having a discussion about what they've drawn. So they'll start telling us that, you know, we need to have shelter, so we'll have homes. We need to have education, so we'll have a school. We need to ensure that if anyone falls sick, they get taken care of, so we'll have a hospital. They'll have fields because you need food. And then there's always the Mandir, Masjid, Gurdwara, because God is also important. And then, you know, there is the Bhaichara aspect also, because peace and brotherhood is also important. So now that they've done this activity and they have identified what is important to them, we'll move towards the reflection. So it starts with what have you identified as basic needs for you to enjoy a happy and fulfilling life, right? You have identified education, you have identified shelter, you have identified healthcare, you have identified food, you've identified the right to practice your own religion, the need for peace and brotherhood. And then we'll show them how all these needs, these basic needs that they have identified, are actually enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as rights that every human being is entitled to by virtue of being a human being. And once they've understood that this Declaration of Human Rights is not, you know, some basically it is a document that talks about all the needs that they themselves have identified, it becomes something that they can relate to. And then we go to the next level to say that, all right, now that you've understood how human rights are actually related to your basic needs, can you think about which of these rights you get to enjoy and practice on a regular basis, and which of these rights have you been denied? And then we take this question deeper and deeper to say that, you know, when you look around you, whose rights tend to be violated the most? So then they start to look at their own experience. They'll talk about how, you know, maybe they have not got to study what they want to study. Maybe because they've not had enough money, they've had to give up on school. They'll talk about what they see in their communities. They'll be able to identify that there is discrimination based on caste, there is discrimination based on religion, there is discrimination based on gender. They'll also then start to reflect on what goes on in their own families. And many boys are able to identify how their sisters tend to get pulled out of school, how their mothers experience violence. And then they are able to connect this to the idea of human rights, to say that when these things happen to women and girls, essentially what is going on is that their rights are being denied and violated, right? So this is one example of how we take one of these broader, larger concepts like human rights, and how we break it down into a simple activity and get them to use their own experiences and then relate it to the concept that we want to communicate. Similarly, if I have to give you another example, how do you communicate this concept of gender? How do you, you know, take a concept on which so much work has been done, right? A lot of academic work has been done. And how do you make it relatable to a 13 or a 14-year-old? So again, the activity is fairly straightforward. And those of you who work in gender will probably recognize these activities, right? These are fairly common activities that are used by most of us. I think even those of us who work with women and girls, what you'll probably see is that the reflection aspect tends to be a little different when you're working with men and boys. So again, over here, we'll tell them to draw an image of a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. And these are images that I've taken from one of our sessions. So, so in some cases, um, the drawings are more detailed, and in others, you don't get to see faces. But what is fairly standard is, you'll have clothing as a distinguishing feature. You'll have the length of the hair. Um, some people might draw utensils when they're drawing women, and some people will draw a briefcase when they draw a man. And then we'll tell them to write out attributes of men and women that come to mind. So what comes to mind when you think of a man, and what comes to mind when you think of a woman? And they list all the typical things. There'll be pants, there'll be breadwinner, there'll be mustache, there'll be sari, there'll be long hair, etc. And then we tell them to circle all the attributes that are biologically determined, and then put a square around all the attributes that are not biologically determined, which are socially constructed. And then in this way, we're able to help them draw that distinction between what is biologically determined and what is determined by society. And then we lead them into a reflection on if social norms tend to be violent and discriminatory, should they be changed, and how can we change them? So in these discussions, boys will typically identify how their sisters get pulled out of school because they have to help with the cooking. And we know that there is nothing in their physiology or in a boy's physiology that prevents you from cooking. So can you help out with the housework? And is that something that you should do? Similarly, they'll identify how their fathers tend to be stressed all the time. They'll talk about how they struggle to find employment. When they don't find employment, they tend to be more worried. They don't share their feelings. And then we'll talk about what kind of an impact that has on the family and why that needs to change. So these are two examples of how we convey concepts, or we take them and break them down into simple activities to make them relatable. But the fundamental piece across all the modules is that they are focused on the reflection of the participants. So we're always trying to ask them questions rather than tell them, or rather than telling them what to think and what to do, right? Because we believe that until and unless they internalize these concepts, we won't really be able to see a lot of change in their attitudes and behaviors. So once a participant has gone through the program, what are some of the outcomes that we see? What changes are we actually able to achieve? Sorry, these are some of the other topics that we cover. There's biological differences, there's sexuality, there's power, there's masculinity, and each of them have an associated activity and reflection that we take our participants through. So coming to the outcomes, what we typically see is within the first few weeks of the program, the participants will start sharing household responsibilities. They'll start cooking, they'll start cleaning, they'll start doing dishes, they'll start washing clothes. I think this level of change it happens rather quickly. In some cases, we've seen participants also challenge menstrual taboos at home. They'll make sure that the family sits together for meals. They'll make sure that their sisters and their mothers are not isolated during menstruation. They'll speak up for them. We've had a couple of cases where our participants have challenged child marriages in their families. In this particular case, you can see Anand. Anand is one of our stellar participants. He prevented a child marriage in his family not once but twice. And he was actually able to mobilize support at multiple levels, including involving Childline and everything else, and police also, to stop this marriage. We'll also have participants who will do street plays in the community to raise awareness on gender-based violence, and they'll participate in rallies, etc. So these are some of the changes that we see in the boys that we work with. Now, when we started this work, there was a lot of pressure on us to be able to demonstrate change, not just in terms of case studies, but we were pushed really hard to try to capture the shift in attitudes as well. So we, over the years, actually, we've developed what we call the gender attitude survey, which quantifies the shifts in attitudes that we see in our
Christina, the sound is breaking up again.
I'm so sorry. Is this better? I'm sorry, we don't have power, so I'm wondering whether that has something to do with this. Is this better, Swarna? Can you hear me now? Swarna, can you hear me?
Yeah, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about my technical issues.
Actually, very clear.
Okay.
Your voice.
So I was talking about the gender attitude survey. Now, this is a tool that's based on the GEMS scale, the gender equality male scale that was developed by Promundo. We've had to contextualize it quite a bit, and we've also changed it from an agree disagree dichotomous type of a survey to a survey that actually captures more qualitative data. And over the years, we've been able to demonstrate that there is a shift in attitudes between the baseline and the end line. So the orange bars capture the baseline and the gray bars capture the end line. I'm happy to talk more about this if anyone wants more details. But this is basically to say that along with qualitative data, we also try to quantify the outcomes that we are able to achieve. And the other piece of the work that we do is building the capacity of the sector to implement programs with men and boys. ECF has launched Project RAISE as a collaborative of civil society organizations, funding partners, and whoever else would like to join. We've created an online platform through which we have disseminated all our tools and resources, and we are welcoming other organizations to share their resources through this portal as well. We've been able to train over 50 organizations across the country, and I think what is really heartening about this is many organizations are able to articulate the need to work with boys. They are able to articulate how they can improve, or they will be able to improve outcomes for women and girls by incorporating this gender transformative approach, and by instituting programs for men and boys. The only thing that is lacking again is resources and tools. We'd actually done a poll about 2 years ago. We polled 100 organizations across the country. And about 90% of them said that yes, there is a need. We just don't have the resources to do it. We don't know how to do it. So this was the main motivation behind Project Raise. And we're very happy to say that it has been very well received. And if any of you would like to access our tools and resources, you're more than welcome to join the collaborative and access these materials. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say. I was hoping to leave enough time for your questions, because it would be good to understand what you are thinking, what kind of support you might require, what are some of the things that you would like us to think about. So I will stop here now, and it would be great if we could have a discussion.
Christina, we already have 2 questions, and this was just wonderful. I mean, I was hoping that you would be able to talk so concretely, and I didn't expect that you would. So I think we're taking away some very practical ideas, as well as places that we can go to for learning more and getting more support on this. So wonderful. The questions are on the chat screen. If you leave them there, I will actually read them out for Christina to answer. The first one is from Abha Jayurkar. Can you talk more about the GEMS and Gender Attitudes Survey? Thanks.
Sure. So the Gender Attitude Survey essentially is a survey of about 10 questions. And this is a scenario-based survey, and the scenarios they capture 3 different elements. So one is violence and tolerance, the other is manhood and masculinity, and the third is gender roles and responsibilities. So we'll have 3 scenarios that are focused on gender roles and responsibilities. The scenario will be, Saurabh is a boy, and he likes to play with dolls, but his parents don't think he should play with dolls, so they throw all the dolls away. Do you think that Saurabh should be allowed to play with dolls? Do you agree or disagree? And you tell us why. So boys will typically fill out the survey, and then we code the responses. So similarly, in terms of violence and discrimination, there'll be a scenario around a mother who is experiencing violence at home, and her son tells her that you should not have to deal with this. So if we have to stop this, we should probably move back to our village. And do you think this is the right thing to do? So do you agree or do you disagree? So typically, participants will write out their responses. And what we're looking for is whether they are able to identify violence, whether they're able to issue any kind of violence, whether they're able to identify or use rights-based language, and whether they're able to identify solutions. So we code the responses based on these 3 or 4 aspects and generate a quantitative score. So you have 10 questions. Each question has 3 points. And based on the score of your survey, you are categorized as gender inequitable, low gender equitable, moderate gender equitable, or gender equitable. So we are currently holding ourselves to a fairly high standard in terms of the rating of 3. So that's why you'll see that we don't see a lot of boys automatically, or we don't see a lot of boys become gender equitable. We've passed it out a little bit to be able to capture those shifts and those nuances a little more. So in most cases, boys are able to identify violence. They'll be able to tell you which right is being violated, but they might still be hesitant around what action to take. So, for example, in the scenario where, uh, you know, uh, the mother leaving the father and taking the children to a safe environment is probably the best solution. So that tends to be a little difficult for the or for the for the participants to identify as the best solution. And that could be because they recognize that it could break up the family, and for them that may not be the most secure option. Similarly, what we see in the gender attitude survey is that attitudes tend to shift fairly easily around gender roles and responsibilities, right? So yes, girls should have the right to education. They should not be made to sit at home. They can wear what they want. Those things tend to shift fairly easily. But attitudes around manhood and masculinity, around violence and tolerance, those take much longer. So yeah, these are some of the things related to the gender attitude survey. I'll be happy to share more information over email if you'd like. And maybe I can take the next question.
Yeah. Kankshi Agarwal has a question, and Puril, if you could unmute her mic. If you raise your hand, Puril can unmute your mics for you. I think there's a raise hand option someplace. So if you go to participants, if you click on participants and you see.
Yeah, I have been able to unmute myself.
Okay, great. So would you,
yeah,
can you ask?
Yes. Thank you so much for actually giving me this opportunity and wonderful presentation. I have a question regarding, because it's a very, very fundamental question perhaps, that gender usually is a very hard thing to talk about even with women, because and if you're going to talk about a women's group or a boys group or any beneficiaries group, they seek a tangible outcome out of it, or there is an immediate impact in their lives. However, with gender, you have to keep working in long term. So that is something I want to understand, that how do you engage these boys in these conversations? Actually, I joined 5 minutes late, so I don't know if you covered that there. And second, what is your hosting space like? Where are these boys coming? Like, is it a school? Is it a spare office in a local constituency? And that's one of the questions. And second, I want to understand, because you're working with, say, adolescent boys, which is wonderful, but what do we do if we have to work with men to make them understand that, there has to be power sharing between men and women, especially in domestic and as well as public spaces? So those are my two questions. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for that question. I'm just going to see if Swarna, can we unmute Yogesh? I'm going to ask Yogesh to talk about, and can we do a little bit of Hindi and English mix? Would that be okay, please?
Yeah, maybe with a little paraphrasing in English, if need be.
Sure. Sure.
But since there's a question about men, I want to add the question that Premila has just typed to that. She says, congrats on the massive process of change. Boys learn from fathers. Can there be a movement that can include fathers? I thought that was related to Kankshi's second question, so I'm adding it there.
Absolutely. तो योगेश आप जरा अनम्यूट करोगे प्लीज? तो मैं जरा क्वेश्चन रिपीट करती हूँ. तो 2-3 क्वेश्चन है. एक, हम मोबिलाइजेशन कैसे करते हैं, हम हमारे एक्टिविटीज कहाँ पे कंडक्ट करते हैं, ये कम्युनिटी स्पेसेस कैसे होते हैं, और तीसरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि अगर हमको मेन के साथ काम करना है तो वो कैसे हो सकता है, और फादर्स को हम कैसे इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं.
Yes, okay, sure. Thank you so much for this question. तो बेसिकली हमारा एक्सपीरियंस ये रहा है कि हम बॉयज़ को मोबिलाइज करते तो उसका एक स्ट्रक्चर्ड हम एक फॉलो करते हैं। तो उसमें मोबिलाइजेशन में हम जब कम्युनिटी में जाते हैं तो अलग अलग स्टेक होल्डर को हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं जहाँ पे वो विद इन कम्युनिटी के होते हैं। उसमें आंगनवाड़ी सेविका आते हैं, शॉपकीपर्स आते हैं, या यूथ ग्रुप ऑलरेडी इस्टेब्लिश्ड होते हैं कम्युनिटीज में, तो उनके साथ हम अप्रोच करते हैं। एसएससी ग्रुप, एसएचजी ग्रुप के साथ हम अप्रोच करते हैं। और पॉलिटिकल लीडर जो होते हैं कि उनका कम्युनिटी के ऊपर होल्ड होता है, तो उनके साथ भी हम ये मिलके कम्युनिटीज के बॉयज के लिए ये प्रोग्राम कैसे हेल्पफुल हो सकता है, और उसके साथ ये कम्युनिटीज में एक अच्छा इन्वायरमेंट क्रिएट होने के लिए ये प्रोग्राम का इम्पैक्ट क्या है, ये हम समझाने की कोशिश करते हैं। और उनका सपोर्ट ज्यादातर हम लेने की कोशिश करते हैं ताकि वो थ्रू आउट द प्रोग्राम को विद इन द कम्युनिटी वो अच्छे तरीके से सपोर्ट कर सके। तो ये कम्युनिटी के मोबिलाइजेशन के कुछ स्ट्रैटेजी है, वो स्ट्रैटेजी हम जब कम्युनिटी में इंटर करते हैं तो अप्लाई करने की कोशिश करते हैं। उसके साथ मोबिलाइजेशन के बाद हम जब एंगेजमेंट के तौर पे आते हैं, तो बॉयज़ को एंगेजमेंट करने का तरीका हम अलग अलग जो स्टेक होल्डर है उनके साथ अप्रोच करके फिर हम उनको एंगेज करते हैं। जैसे कि बॉयज़ को हम पहले ये प्रोग्राम के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन शेयर करते हैं, उनका इंटरेस्ट एरिया क्या है वो हम जानने की कोशिश करते हैं। और साथ में उनके घर में जाके होम विजिट करके पेरेंट को भी ये प्रोग्राम के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन देते हैं, और उनका एंगेजमेंट हम प्रोग्राम में लेने की कोशिश करते हैं। और एंगेजमेंट पूरा थ्रू आउट द प्रोग्राम मेंटेन रहने के लिए, सस्टेन रहने के लिए, जैसे क्रिस्टीना ने शुरू में बताया था कि जो हम मेथडोलॉजी यूज करते हैं वो मेथडोलॉजी के ऊपर हम काफी ध्यान देते हैं। तो हमारा हर एक मॉड्यूल 2 घंटे का होता है। तो मॉड्यूल की शुरुआत ही हम एनर्जाइज गेम के साथ करते हैं जहाँ पे बॉयज एंजॉय करते हैं, और वही गेम हम हमारे जो करंट कंटेंट हम लीड करने जा रहे हैं वो कंटेंट को हम लीड करते हैं। और कंटेंट फैसिलिटेट करने का भी हमारा तरीका काफी एक्टिविटी बेस्ड होता है। मतलब एक सब्जेक्ट हमें उनके साथ शेयर करना है, जेंडर रिलेटेड बात करना है, तो वो थियरी बेस्ड नहीं होता है, लेक्चर बेस्ड नहीं होता है। तो वो कंटेंट को ही हम एक्टिविटी बेस्ड उनका रिफ्लेक्शन ज्यादा करवा के लेते हैं, तो उनका एंगेजमेंट में हमें मेंटेन रखने के लिए काफी हेल्पफुल होता है। दूसरा क्वेश्चन जो रिलेटेड था कि कहाँ पे उनको ये क्लास कंडक्ट करने के लिए हम उनको मोबिलाइज करते हैं। तो हर एक कम्युनिटी में एक कॉमन सेंटर होता है जो कंस्ट्रक्टेड किया जाता है गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा। तो वो कॉमन सेंटर हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं, और ये कॉमन सेंटर के परमिशन मिलने के लिए भी हमें अलग अलग स्टेक होल्डर के साथ अप्रोच करना, उनके साथ जुड़े रहना भी काफ़ी इम्पोर्टेंट होता है। तो कुछ कम्युनिटीज में आईसीडीएस सेंटर है जहाँ पे ऑलरेडी आंगनवाड़ी का काम चलता है। तो उनके साथ हम कोलैबोरेट करके उनको प्रोग्राम का बेनिफिट एक्सप्लेन करके वो कम्युनिटी सेंटर का हम परमिशन लेते हैं। और वो कम्युनिटी सेंटर काफ़ी फेमिलियर होता है कम्युनिटी के लोगों के लिए, कम्युनिटी के बॉयज़ के लिए, इसलिए हम वो सेंटर लेने की कोशिश करते हैं। और वो कॉमन सेंटर पे हमारा वीकली बेसिस पे 2 घंटे का सेशन हम बॉयज़ के साथ कंडक्ट करते हैं। तीसरा सवाल जो था कि फादर रिलेटेड, तो जो स्ट्रक्चर्ड हमारा करिकुलम है, तो वो स्ट्रक्चर्ड करिकुलम में हम फादर का इन्वॉल्वमेंट भी लेते हैं। तो इस प्रोग्राम के अंतर्गत हमने कुछ 4 या 5 होम विजिट या पेरेंट मीटिंग हमने डिजाइन की है। तो प्रोग्राम के शुरू में हम जितने बॉयज हमारे कार्यक्रम में इन्वॉल्व है वो सभी बॉयज के पेरेंट को हम इनवाइट करते हैं, और उनकी एक ग्रुप पेरेंट मीटिंग कंडक्ट करते हैं, ताकि ये प्रोग्राम में क्या होने वाला है, जैसे क्वेश्चन में भी आया था कि जेंडर के ऊपर काम करना थोड़ा सा लॉन्ग टर्म आउटकम के जैसे है। तो जब बॉयज बदलने की कोशिश करते हैं तो उनको बैकलैश ना आए, पेरेंट के तरफ से उनको सपोर्ट मिलता जाए लगातार जब वो बदलने की कोशिश करते हैं तब। इसलिए हम ये ग्रुप पेरेंट मीटिंग प्रोग्राम के शुरू में उनके साथ लेते हैं, और वो ग्रुप पेरेंट मीटिंग में भी हम जेंडर रिलेटेड अवेयरनेस पेरेंट के भीतर भी डेवलप करने की कोशिश करते हैं। Yes.
Thank you, Yogesh. So the other part of the question was related to how do we use these lessons to work with men? And I think over there, our experience has been that, see, we've not engaged men directly in this structured program, but
Hmm.
the experience that we have is through training facilitators at other organizations. So we've been able to use the same principles with male
Hmm.
facilitators at other organizations. And what we're finding is that you will probably have a slightly higher level discussion, but the same activities seem to work just fine. And I think the most critical piece of working with men, of working with boys, is to create that safe space for reflection and to give this process some time, right? What we find is, and again, I have to say that this is one of the things that I think Yogesh and our other field mentors do really, really well, which is not to react to what somebody has said, but to let them voice their opinions. Because again, from having worked in this space, some of the things that you hear can be a little jarring, and somebody who's a little less patient like me may feel the need to retort immediately, but that is that one urge that you have to control. And you've got to be able to create a space for people to share, for people to talk, and only after they start feeling safe do we see that they open up and they actually start to become um, open to new ideas, right? And I would say that getting to that point is very, very crucial. Yogesh, would you like to add anything?
Puril, can you unmute Yogesh, please?
हेलो, हाँ, आई थिंक आपने किसी ने कवर किया है, तो और कुछ सवाल रहेंगे तो वो एड्रेस करेंगे.
ठीक है, ठीक है. I think there is one
There
question.
are two follow-up questions, actually, Christina. One is, how do you, and I'm say it in English because we have a mixed audience usually.
Absolutely.
How do you record the response of local political leaders like Sarpanchs and Zilla Parishad members, and how do they cooperate? This is from Kankshi Agarwal. Pramila has a follow-up question. Will not the fathers be threatened by their boys?
So we are in touch with the local corporators. We have not done a lot of data collection with them. But we do engage with them. So there is a sense of whether they feel that the program is going well, whether they want to continue to support us or not. But beyond that point, we haven't gone into a lot of detail with them around collecting data. I hope that answers your question. The other piece around whether fathers will be threatened. योगेश, आप कुछ कहना चाहोगे कि फादर्स को क्या लगता है जब बॉयज जेंडर नॉर्म्स चैलेंज करते हैं घर पे, तो फादर्स का रिएक्शन क्या होता है?
ओके, ग्रेट. तो आई थिंक ना, फादर एज अ मेन है, और जैसे कि पेट्रियार्कल सिस्टम में अगर मेन की तरफ हम देखते हैं तो ऑलरेडी वो प्रिविलेज्ड है, उनके पास पावर है, और किसी भी फादर को, मेन को ऐसा नहीं लगेगा कि मेरा पावर ऐसे ही कोई छीन के ले जाए. तो वेरी स्ट्रेटेजिकली उनके साथ काम करने की आवश्यकता है. इसीलिए जब बॉयज के साथ हम काम करते हैं तो बैकलैश भी काफी आते हैं, राइट? तो कुछ हद तक जैसे हमारे प्रोग्राम के बॉयज में ये बदलाव आने की कोशिश होती है, तो कुछ फादर को उनको अनकंफर्टेबल लगता है शुरू में. मतलब ऐसा लगता है कि अरे ये इमीडिएटली इतने साल, 13-14 साल उन्होंने कुछ नहीं किया घर में, और अभी इमीडिएटली ये क्या करने लगा है, झाड़ू मारने लगा है, सिस्टर के साथ सपोर्ट करने लगा है काम पे. तो हम पूरा फोकस वो बॉयज के ऊपर ही रखते हैं। और प्रोग्राम के जैसे शुरू में एक किसीना ने शेयर किया था कि 4 कंपोनेंट पे हम काम करते हैं कि नॉलेज, स्किल, एटीट्यूड एंड एक्शन। मतलब वो इंडिविजुअल एक्शन भी, वो नॉलेज को ट्रांसफॉर्म करने के लिए वो इंडिविजुअल एक्शन भी कैसे करे, इसके ऊपर भी हम ज्यादातर फोकस करते हैं। और वो एक्शन करते समय स्किल को भी हम उनको प्रोवाइड करने की कोशिश करते हैं, ताकि ये काम घर का सिर्फ लड़की का नहीं है या माँ का नहीं है, ये एज अ बॉयज में भी कैसे कर सकता हूँ, वो कैसे उनके साथ नेगोशिएट करके कम्युनिकेशन अच्छी तरीके से कर सकता है, इसके ऊपर भी हमारा फोकस रहता है। तो काफी बार ये फादर से आता है। तो जो हमने प्रोग्राम में 4 होम विजिट डिजाइन किए हैं, वो होम विजिट के दौरान भी इसके ऊपर हम बॉयज के साथ, हमारे जो मेंटर्स है वो मेंटर हम पेरेंट के साथ डिस्कशन लीड करते हैं, ताकि ये काम कैसे सबका है और वो भी कैसे कर सकता है, और उसका बेनिफिट घर के सिस्टर हो या मदर हो उनको कैसे मिल सकता है। तो इस तरह के का जो कम्युनिकेशन है वो लगातार हमें उनके पेरेंट के साथ, स्पेशली फादर के साथ कंटिन्यूसली करना पड़ता है। और वो सब इंटरमिशन हमारा कंप्लीट होने के बाद कुछ हमारे फादर के ये भी स्टोरी हमारे पास है कि बॉयज, वो लड़का शुरू में घर का काम करने लगा था और उसके साथ साथ फादर ने भी वो काम करना शुरुआत किया, क्योंकि उनको भी रियलाइज हुआ कि अरे घर में हम सब रहते हैं, ये एक अच्छा इनिशिएटिव है हमारे बेटे की तरफ से, तो क्यों ना हम भी ये स्टार्ट करें। तो हमारे पास ऐसे कुछ केस स्टोरी है कि बॉयज शुरू में झाड़ू लगाता था और साथ साथ में उनके फादर भी उनका बॉयज का इन्फ्लुएंस उनके ऊपर होके वो भी झाड़ू लगाना शुरुआत कर दे। तो इस प्रकार के शुरू में लिमिटेशंस आते हैं, लेकिन बाद में उनका इन्फ्लुएंस जैसे बढ़ता जाता है तो वो भी इनिशिएटिव लेने की कोशिश करते हैं फादर। यस। और मैं साथ में सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल लीडर वाला एक सवाल था, उसमें सिर्फ मैं ऐड करता हूँ और रुकता हूँ। तो ये पॉलिटिकल लीडर को एंगेजमेंट करने का ऐसा यूनिवर्सल प्रिंसिपल तो नहीं है कि सब जगह पे वो लागू होगा, लेकिन बेस्ड ऑन आवर एक्सपीरियंस हर एक कम्युनिटी का पॉलिटिकल लीडर का इन्फ्लुएंस अलग अलग होता है। तो हमें वो इंटरनली स्ट्रैटेजिक डेवलप करनी पड़ती है कि प्रोग्राम में कहाँ तक उनका इन्वॉल्वमेंट लेना है और कहाँ तक लेना नहीं है। तो ये अगर हमने स्ट्रैटेजिकली सोच के अगर उनके साथ हमने इंटरवेंशन किया तो हाँ, प्रोग्राम में उनका हेल्प हो सकता है। यस, थैंक यू।
Thanks, Yogesh.
Christina, will you paraphrase that? There are 2 related questions. I'm going to club them together and give them to you.
Sure. Can you give me the questions?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. One is from Devyani Srinivasan. Can you talk a bit more about the backlash from fathers? What type of backlash have you seen? And then there is one from a colleague who's not been able to sign into Zoom today, which is related, although she sent it earlier. Does and how does ECF engage with men's rights groups and activists? Is there any scope to engage with such organizations?
So I'll take
I'll give
the
these both to
second
you before you take Nirupama's.
first. I'll take the second question first because I think Yogesh will be able to speak more to the backlash that we get from the fathers. So on the question of whether we
Can you
engage,
briefly paraphrase what Yogesh said earlier for our non-Hindi speaking?
yes. So on his point of working with political leaders, what he was saying is that we have to be a little cautious about how we engage them. We do seek the support of political leaders in our communities, but we've also learned that to a certain extent, it's better to maintain a little bit of distance because somewhere they also start to expect certain things from us that we are not comfortable doing. And I think before that, he was talking about the fathers and our engagement with them. So we engage with fathers through the group parents meetings that we organize and the individual parent meetings that we do with participants, because as boys take actions in their homes and families, it's important for the parents to understand why they're doing what they're doing. so that they can support the boys as they take action. Yogesh was also saying that we've had a couple of instances where fathers have also changed their behavior around household chores because they feel that, you know, our son is doing something new, something different, something that is good, you know, so we should support him. So there have been a couple of instances where fathers have also started sharing household responsibilities because the son initiated that process at home. So moving on to the question of whether we engage with men's rights groups and whether there is scope for doing that. It is definitely something we should be doing, but we're not doing at the moment. I think it would be good for us to think about how we can do that, because the more dialogues we have, the more we communicate with each other. I think you know, that is how we will be able to move ahead rather than always be in this confrontational position. But the short answer is no, we're not doing much on that front right now. योगेश, क्या आप फादर्स के बैकलैश के बारे में थोड़ा बता सकते हैं कि फादर्स से क्या बैकलैश आता है?
यस श्योर, ओके। तो फादर के तरफ से काफ़ी सारे बैकलैश आते हैं, तो उसमें से 2-3 बैकलैश मैं आपके साथ शेयर करूँगा। एक तो बैकलैश सबसे ज़्यादा आता है कि एज अ फादर वो अपने बेटे की जो प्रायोरिटी है वो एजुकेशन को देना चाहते हैं ज़्यादा, तो उनका एजुकेशन रिलेटेड जो एक्स्ट्रा करिकुलम एक्टिविटीज़ हो या ट्यूशन जैसे एक्टिविटीज़ हो, वहाँ पे वो ज़्यादा इन्वॉल्व करने की कोशिश करते हैं। और हमारा क्लास और वो टाइम भी थोड़ा सा मैच होता है, तो वो ज़्यादा प्रायोरिटी अदर एक्टिविटीज़ को देने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो वहाँ पे हमें उनको जेंडर रिलेटेड लर्न करना या ये इशू के ऊपर अवेयरनेस करना, खुद के ऊपर बदलाव करना, ये ज़्यादा प्रायोरिटीज़ उनको नहीं लगते हैं। तो जैसे जैसे शुरू में वो एंगेज होते हैं, हमारे प्रोग्राम में इन्वॉल्व होते हैं और बाद में उनको कुछ बदलाव दिखाई देते हैं, तब वो जाके उनका जो विरोध है वो विरोध कम होने में हमें दिखता है। दूसरा जो बैकलैश सबसे ज़्यादा स्ट्रांग हमें आता है कि रिलेटेड टू डोमेस्टिक चोर्स। तो जब हमारे प्रोग्राम में पार्टिसिपेंट आते हैं और आफ्टर प्रोग्राम उनके भीतर जो बदलाव हमें दिखाई देता है वो सबसे ज़्यादा रोल एंड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज़ में ज़्यादा दिखाई देता है, जहाँ पे बॉयज़ को रियलाइज़ होता है कि डोमेस्टिक चोर्स घर के फीमेल मेंबर का नहीं है तो हम भी कर सकते हैं। तो वो कुछ छोटे छोटे काम करने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो वहाँ पे इमीडिएटली एज ए फादर उनका रिस्पॉन्ड होता है कि ये आप क्या कर रहे हैं, वो तो तुम्हारे बहन का काम है, तुम मत करो, तुम एक लड़के हो, लड़के जैसे रहो। तो इस प्रकार का बैकलैश जो डोमेस्टिक चोर्स रिलेटेड वो चेंज करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, वहाँ पे उनका आता है। तो हमारे प्रोग्राम के जो पेरेंट मीटिंग या होम विजिट है, वो होम विजिट में वो बैकलैश को हम ओवरकम करने की ज़्यादातर कोशिश करते हैं। यस।
Sona, would you like me to paraphrase that response? Or was it short enough? Okay, so there's two things, one or two areas of backlash from fathers. One is they think that their sons should focus on academics or sports, so they would rather their sons go to tuition and, you know, probably engage in sports rather than go to a session that focuses on gender. The second aspect is because we start seeing boys sharing household responsibilities fairly quickly, the fathers will try and discourage boys by saying that, you know, ye ladki ka kaam hai, this is your sister's work, you don't do it. And then we mitigate those issues by having more conversations with the parents to help them understand more about the program and help them understand why it is important for them to support their boys as they take these actions.
Thank you. I'm going to read out Nirupama Sarthi's question. Thanks for the detailing out of your strategy and process. Very interesting. Some reflections from my own experience working with a multi-country young women's empowerment program. Our grassroots partners across urban poor communities in all the countries found it essential to work with boys and found good success with the limited interventions we could manage within the program, despite it not being a program mandate. However, the common refrain we hear is that work with men and boys takes away precious, already limited resources for work with women. What is your take, and how has your experience been with convincing supporters and funders?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for that. Um, so yes, we had to deal with these questions a lot, I would say, in the first 7 years of um, having set up the organization and the program. Um, but what we're seeing now is that there is a growing awareness among funders. Funders are also more participatory in the way in which they're building their strategies. So they are listening to their partners a little more than they used to in the past. So, and again, I'm speaking from a pre-COVID March 18th, 2020 kind of perspective, because those were days of great optimism, because we actually felt that we had turned the corner, and funders were aware of the need to engage men and boys along with women and girls, and they were open to funding these types of programs. Now, COVID has thrown up its own set of challenges, because we know that the pie is going to shrink. We are doing what we can to educate funders as well, and to try to understand what they are thinking around how they are going to manage their resources. But it remains to be seen. We don't know exactly how this is going to play out in the next couple of months, but we will continue to lobby for more resources to be channeled towards women and girls, and for programs that focus on women and girls to also include boys in the conversation.
Thank you. There are no other questions in the chat, but there is a comment from Kankshi, which is a follow-up, explaining that she asked, it's kind of hard to read in Hindi and English together.
Can
and translate.
I do that?
Yeah. Why don't you paraphrase in English? Because
yeah, I will do that. So thank you so much. So I meant to ask those questions about the engagement and responses from the political leaders. I am coming from a place where we train women to run for elections. So I wanted to understand what role can political will or the gender of the representation at that level, because we know that there is 50% reservation in some states and 33% reservation in others for women. And if we can record the responses of these political leaders going forward, I don't know if it's just my thought. So we can see how political will plays an important role in promoting these programs and build a case for engaging more of them, and also giving them such insights when they run for their campaigns, or even talk about these kind of things in their speeches. So that was the place I was coming from, and I thought that it would be worthwhile to look at some data from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. There's definitely scope to do work in that areas, and I would even take a step back and say that it would be good to even implement gender transformative programs for political leaders, right? Because they also have a role to play in reinforcing patriarchal norms and patriarchal structures. So yeah, I would say that
I'd be in touch with you. I'd love to write to you, Christina. Thank you for this brilliant presentation. I enjoyed every bit of it. So I'm sure that we can find synergies. Thank you so much for that.
Christina, I'm going to ask you something, perhaps a little pedantic. I was wondering, I mean, I have a sense of how I would map the women's movement and different kinds of feminist work around equality. But I was wondering if it was now possible. There's been about 10, 15 years of many new organizations and many new initiatives to engage with men and boys. I was wondering if you had, if you felt comfortable doing an off-the-cuff mapping of the different kinds of initiatives out there, and obviously then giving us a sense of where ECF fits, because I think intuitively what you do works because you work with individuals, individuals change communities. This is also very much the way Pragnya works. But I was just wondering if you would feel comfortable attempting a mapping.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. I may not be able to map it to the women's rights movement. I think Harish Sadani from MAVA does a far better job at that, or even Manisha Tai Gupte from Masoom. But what I can say based on what we've seen over the last few years is that programs that focus on men and boys will typically fall into two categories. One is the prevention category and the other is the redressal kind of category. The prevention category is focused on building awareness and transforming attitudes and behaviors, and very rooted in the human rights approach. The redressal approaches are focused on strengthening your response mechanisms and dismantling structures or systemic levels of violence and discrimination. So that is typically what we see. You have some programs that are focused on boys and fewer programs that are focused on men. Center for Health and Social Justice is one organization that has done a lot of work with men. Their Samajhdar Jodidar program is something that was implemented in Maharashtra and a bunch of other states. And of course, MAVA, which is Men Against Violence. And I forget what the acronym stands for, but Harish Sadani is somebody who runs MAVA out of Bombay. They've also done a lot of work with men. But yeah, so now that is the extent of the mapping that I will attempt.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? If you raise your hand, she'll unmute you and then you can just talk. Devyani, as a follow-up to your mapping, are you equating working with men with redressal?
Maybe that was an
in the sense that it's almost too late at that point. Is an additional
I'm looking at it purely from the programmatic point of view. So once violence has taken place, then what kind of mechanisms are in place to provide redressal? And in some cases, there are those conciliatory approaches where men and women are brought together for counseling sessions, etc., etc. So I'm speaking about it purely from a program choice kind of level.
Any other comments or questions? We have a very hard time, even when we design programs and we say no men are welcome, we have a very hard time getting men into a room, into a conversation on gender-based violence. One of the things Pragnya has been doing for many years is what we call community cafes, which is essentially we bring the chai, we bring the biscuits, and we have an hour and a half informal conversation around gender equality or gender violence issues. And we do this in people's homes, in community centers, in buildings, or, and we say, oh, bring all the men, but the men typically don't come. And if a man happens to be the organizer, which has happened once or twice, then he alone, he will be the only man in the room. That is a barrier that we have found it very hard to get past. Would others in this gathering have thoughts on that?
So I can share a little bit around our experience of working with male facilitators from other organizations. And what we sense is that we typically run a 6-day workshop. Now, I understand it's not the same as announcing an event and expecting people to show up. Here, these participants are sent by their organizations. But even then, what we see is it typically takes about half a day for the men in the room to kind of uncross their legs and unfold their arms, because I think it could be because they do feel threatened, and only after you're able to create that so-called safe space do they feel that they will be included in the conversation. So they will be able to participate in the conversation rather than being spoken to. So this is what we've seen. We've also noticed that it takes a couple of hours or maybe a day or so for people to start opening up. So again, it goes back to the idea of whether or not people feel safe in participating in these conversations, whether they feel that it's going to be a dialogue or whether they're going to be spoken to or talked at all the time.
Which then, when you're working with the general public, is raises the question of whether these are conversations to be had in single-sex groups or in mixed groups. If you can't bring people together into a room, then the question is answered by logistics. You can only work with the people who've shown up. But this is, I think, for us, this is a challenge that we face with every single conversation that we do.
Yeah. So I think it would also vary according to age group, because we know from having worked with Harish and Mava, they do a lot of work with boys in the 18 to 25 age group. They do a lot of work with college students and young adults. That age group seems to be more amenable. It is always harder to draw older men into the conversation. I know CHSJ they've been successful in doing that, but they've also used their experience of having been a community-based organization, and they've built this program on the work that they've done in health with women and girls. So they have a bit of an advantage there, I would say.
Well, I don't see any other questions or comments. So
there is one.
There is one. Where?
Last one.
Yeah, here. Yes. Instead of bringing men to our meetings, can we send mass media messages to their homes for this? This is from Burnett Pramila.
Absolutely, as in that is definitely something that can be done. There are organizations who are doing this. They are using IVR techniques. The only thing is I would calibrate expectations around outcomes. Mass media messaging and IVR SMS type of messaging may serve to inform, but it may or may not trigger that level of reflection that is actually required to bring about a transformation in behavior. But nonetheless, I think it's important, and I think especially when it comes to media, we got to advocate for a more equitable representation. In fact, our partners Breakthrough in Delhi are running a really interesting campaign on putting up your statutory warnings in movies that depict misogyny and violence against women. So I think that might be one thing that some of you might be interested in looking up and supporting as well.
Nirupama says most men do feel threatened by gender talks or women's rights issues. What has worked is to package it in other ways, like leadership, life skills, etc., especially working with young men. Discussing masculinity has worked as a peg to draw men to male-only spaces and open up the conversation. Rahul Roy has done some excellent work on this. And Pramila adds, we buy things based on advertisements, bombardment.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
No, so I fully agree with Nirupama's statement. We also find that when we do our sessions on patriarchy, when we do our sessions on masculinity, those tend to be quite eye-opening even for our participants when they are able to look at the impact on themselves. And in our case, we're working with young boys, so peer pressure comes out as a significant issue that they are dealing with. But yeah, you're absolutely right, doesn't it? It would be a good way to package these types of activities.
Then maybe what we are saying is that mixed gender conversation spaces are actually something for the future, that we haven't reached the point where men are comfortable talking about gender, masculinity, rights in the presence of women and vice versa. Maybe that's a milestone that still lies ahead.
Possibly, and I would still say that it would vary from context to context. So, for example, an organization like CHSJ that has a presence in the community and that has worked with a lot of women, just because they are an organization that the community and the men are familiar with, they might still be able to draw a mixed audience. But if somebody is starting from scratch, then it would probably be better to start with smaller single sex groups.
Well, on that note, Christina, I'm going to say thank you so much for doing this. Christina and Yogesh, actually. I think we will be putting this up on our YouTube channel. So a lot more people will learn from some of the concrete ideas and information that you've shared. And I'm really, really grateful. I think many of us will be signing up to learn more about Project Raise as well. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's attending a Pragya talk for the first time. We're very new to the digital space. And I think this is where the talks are going to be for the next few months at least. I hope you will be a regular. Thank you so much for coming.